What's up, world? Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Conversation. I am your host, Roger A. Franco. So, the topic of today's conversation, the discussion is around, separating fact from fiction, sort of dispelling certain myths. When certain crimes are committed in this country, when they're in the media, on the news, or what have you, there's always a narrative that it's a certain demographic or certain ethnic group that tends to commit certain types of crimes. So, it made me wonder, what the reality of the situation is. And, I wanted to take a look at statistics of, who's committing what type of crimes, age demographics and whatnot. Again, the purpose is to sort of separate fact from fiction and, get us to really focus on, like I said, who's doing what and what the real issues are. So I took a look at a statistical brief that was released in January 2021 by the U.S. Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Statistics. And they addressed the issue of race and ethnicity based on who committed violent crimes in 2018. So based on the data compiled by the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Program, black people make up 13% of the U.S. population. They were 33% of persons arrested for non-fatal violent crimes. So black people represent 13% of the total U.S. population, and they were arrested for 33% of non-fatal violent crimes. And those crimes include rape, robbery, aggravated assault, and other types of assault. As far as Latinos are concerned, they make up 18% of the U.S. population, and they accounted for 21% of people arrested for serious non-fatal violent crimes. As I mentioned, this is in 2018. And for white people, they make up 60% of the population, and they were 46% of the people who were arrested for these same types of crimes, non-fatal violent crimes. So I wanted to take a look at the percentage because, people say that, for black people, a disproportionate amount of people are committing crimes. So the U.S. population right now is approximately around 300 million. And black people make up 13% of the U.S. population. So we break that down, and then we take a look at, the number of people committing crimes. And it actually comes out to 33% of the total population of black people in this country are committing crimes. So I took a look at white folks. Again, they are 60% of the population. And they actually, the amount of people who committed crimes in relation to their total population in the country amounted to about 46%. So, again, to sort of dispel certain myths, in all actuality, based on what the statistics say, white people commit more crimes than black people. A lot of people can make arguments to say that, that is due to the fact that, the white population is bigger than, the African American or the black population in the country. But again, just something to think about. I think these statistics are pretty interesting. In 2019, 69.4%, so almost 70% of all individuals arrested were white. 26.6% were black, and 19% were Latino. So again, if we're taking a look at statistics, white people are committing more crimes in this country. So I wanted to take a look also at, age demographics. In particular, juveniles, who are defined as anyone who's under the age of 18. So in 2019, about 63% of juvenile delinquents arrested were white. About 34% of juveniles were black, and 23% were Latino. And of all adults arrested in 2019, about 70% were white, 26% were black, and about 18% were Latino. So, if you tend to take a look at the crimes that are reported in the media, again, there's always a certain demographic that's always highlighted as committing certain crimes. There are a lot of people out there that believe that every black person has criminal tendencies to break the law. But, again, if we take a look at these statistics, it shows that, white people do commit more crimes. Now, white individuals, from the statistics that I looked at, it said that they were arrested for more often for violent crimes than any other individual of race. They accounted for about 60% of those arrests. Of adults arrested for murder, and here's where, it gets interesting, about 50% were black, 46% were white, and all the other races amounted to about 3%. White juveniles, again, white kids under the age of 18, comprised 50% of all juveniles arrested for violent crimes. Black juveniles accounted for about 46% for violent crimes, and white juveniles comprised about 55% of all juveniles arrested for property crimes. So now let's take a look at, some of the particular crimes that were committed in 2020. This is as per the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. So in the year of 2020, for the crime of murder or non-negligent manslaughter, this is, again, as I said, for juveniles under the age of 18, 370 white kids were arrested, as opposed to black kids, 540. For robbery, it was about 4,400 for whites and almost 7,000 for blacks. Aggravated assault, about 11,000 for whites and 7,000 for blacks. Burglary, 8,600 for whites and 6,000 for blacks. And for larceny, theft, whites were 26,000 and for blacks were 18,000. So based on these statistics, it appears that black kids are committing more murder than their white counterparts and also are involved in more robberies. But whites are committing more aggravated assault, burglary crimes, and larceny, theft. Again, if you take a look at the crimes that are reported in the media, it seems like almost every black kid is involved in, the crime wave of the smash and grab and all that type of stuff. But it shows here that white kids are actually more involved in that type of crime. That would be considered larceny. So again, about 26,000 white kids are involved in that in 2020. So, another sort of myth or, stereotype that I wanted to address is, black on black crime. The propensity for black people to commit crimes against their own kind. And in all actuality, it's reported that 93% of murder victims were killed by someone of their own race. So it's not only black people. It's whites killing whites, Latinos killing Latinos, Asians killing Asians, and whatnot. So I took a look at also the number one leading cause of death for black males between the ages of 15 and 34. So going back to 2011, as reported by the CDC, homicide was the number one killer. Second were accidents. Third cause of death was suicide. And heart disease was the third ranked cause of death for black men between the ages of 24 and 34. So that was in 2011. So when we hit the pandemic, the rate of gun-related homicides amongst black males actually skyrocketed. It shows that during that time, for males ages 10 to 24, they were about 21 times more likely to be killed by a firearm than whites in the same age range. So obviously, the statistics show, and it's something I think we all know already, there's a problem in our communities with gun violence. Just think about that. The number one leading cause of death for young black males between the age of 15 and 24 is murder. And now, more recently, I checked for 2022, homicide ranks, this is crazy. Homicide ranks number one as the leading cause of death for African males ages 1 to 44. Let me say that again. Homicide ranks number one as the leading cause of death for African American males ages 1 to 44. This information is out there. You can look this up. As I mentioned, I got this from the CDC. The fourth leading cause of death amongst all African American males of all ages is homicide. So, obviously that's a real issue. Ages 1 to 44, that's crazy. So then I took a look at the crimes of child abuse and child molestation. And in 2021, about 200,000 whites were arrested for child abuse, about 90,000 blacks, and about 89,000 Latinos. And, I also took a look at a couple of reports and studies that were done that showed, one in particular was from the University of Texas at San Antonio, that found that black and Latinos charged in federal sex abuse cases receive disproportionately higher sentences than whites. The majority of those convicted of having child pornography in their possession for white folks is 86%, for blacks is 4%, and Latinos 10%. Individuals convicted of sexual abuse offenses, 42% are white, 18% are black, and 10% are Latino. So, the reason why I wanted to sort of discuss all of this is because, again, if we take a look at, what's said in society and what we see in mainstream media, it appears, that most black people commit crime, right? And there's a lot of people that believe that. But again, if we take a look at statistics, and, this is stuff that you could look up for yourselves, the numbers say otherwise. So, what's the narrative being pushed? Think about why that narrative is being pushed and who's pushing it. What's the purpose of it? As far as, homicide being the number one killer of black males, young black males, what's the root cause of that? Is it something that's endemic to our communities? And by the way, I took a look. Homicide is the fourth leading cause of death for white males between the ages of 15 and 34. So young black males are killing each other at a higher rate, and it's a result of gun violence. So what can we attribute that to? Like I said, is it something that's endemic only to our culture? Is it because of rap music and the imagery and the messaging that we see nowadays? Is it because there's a lack of resources in the communities that can help deal with certain issues such as poverty, education, mental health? Also, the third leading cause of death for young black males between the ages of 15 and 34, like I stated previously, is suicide. So, it might not be number one, but I think that's very significant. So, the purpose of me providing this type of information is, really to get people thinking, to be thought-provoking, and, for us to really focus on the reality of the situation and not a narrative that's being pushed or, propaganda. There's something definitely that needs to be fixed within our community in terms of violence, and in particular gun violence. So let's focus on what the real issues are and get to some resolution. So, this episode here, I think, is going to be part one of, future episodes that I'm going to do that are really focused and geared toward providing statistics and information. And I think from that, we can sort of figure out and decide, what are the real issues that need to be addressed? What's real? Again, separating fact from fiction. So, this a little bit of information for you to sort of ponder and think about. Thanks for joining for this episode of The Conversation, and stay tuned for more. And don't forget, hit subscribe.